All right, welcome back to the Ace Trainer podcast. My name is Rowan Stavino. I'm here with Gabriel Smart. How you doing today, Gabe?
I'm doing all right. Just got back from Dortmund. Got top 128 there, and now we got Louisville in about a week and a half. So just kind of trying to get ready for that. Yeah, it's the second major, I guess. Actually, no, it's technically the third major tournament of Stellar Crown. So kind of interesting to see kind of how the metagame is, kind of gonna, I guess, develop. So yeah, I'm definitely
Yeah.
excited for it.
Yeah, that's right. You went to Dortmund, and then there was also the Joinville Regional Championships. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what decks did well at both of those regionals, what decks did bad, and what decks we know you guys want to hear about. There was a cloth. We're going to be talking about cloth later. I know everyone's excited about that. But let's get right into the episode. I'm going to be preparing you guys mostly for the Louisville Regional Championships. Some of us might also be going to the Lima SPE that's coming up this weekend. So, Gabe, why don't you start? Talk us through Dortmund. You were there. What did you play? What did you see that was interesting there?
Yeah, so I played a pretty standard Zard list. I ended up playing for Nest Ball because this is a format where you actually really want to go first in a lot of situations. So I felt that playing kind of a super consistent Zard list would be pretty good. I started off 4-0, and then I lost to Stefan, and then I still was able to make it into day two, but I hit some pretty difficult matchups, which kind of doomed my run. Like throughout the second day. But yeah, the metagame was definitely pretty interesting. We saw Trapos was only about 5% of the meta. However, it was the most played deck heading into day two. I think that was, kind of a major surprise. However, the deck didn't actually do very well in day two. So that was, kind of something. There were, multiple throughout like top 64. There was, I think a few in top 32, but none actually made it into top 8, which was, kind of interesting to see. Raging Bolt was also played a ton. Bolt, felt like a deck that, it had just won the Champions League. So, it definitely had like a decent amount of hype. It showed up in, pretty big numbers. I think was the second or third, like most played deck. However, it didn't necessarily see a whole lot of success there. I believe was one in top 8s. However, just kind of walking through the tables, it seemed like the majority of them were kind of at, I guess, like the middle tables, and like it didn't seem like there were like a whole I guess like a lot of bolts separating themselves from the field. So like that was pretty interesting, seeing the amount of Snorlax that also showed up. There was a decent amount that saw success. And then I think the biggest surprise was Dragapult. I think that Dragapult Pidgeot was kind of the variant that most people were kind of talking about. However, a variant with no Pidgeot ended up winning the tournament.
Yeah, and that was really crazy to me. Because I always thought this deck lost to Raging Bolt. That's right? That Dragapult loses to Raging Bolt
For the most part, yeah. I mean,
for
let's
the
say if it's
most
like
part.
Squawkabilly, then it's like kind of closer, but like I feel like you just could get like ran over.
Yeah, so maybe I don't know. Maybe his version of Dragapult is a little faster and can do a bit better. But that surprised me. Yeah, Raging Bolt went from the most popular deck. Maybe it falling off so hard in day two kind of paved the way for Ryuki to win the event. I also loved the list. The no Pidgeot seems super clean. I love the Tatsugiri. He also played 2 Rotom, which like I don't know why. I think the Japanese players like playing 2 Rotom in best of 1, and then he just kind of stuck with it in the best of 3 format. I guess I'm not a fan of double Rotom. Um, is that right? Do you think it's just for prizing reasons in best of 1, or do you think the Rotom is so important? Like, why not just play 4 Nustballs and 1 Rotom?
Yeah, I would probably play for Nestball in this deck. Maybe because the majority of their tournaments, I pretty much think every single tournament except for top cut of their events are best of 1. So, playing the second Rotom, for a, 15 round, like best of 1 tournament definitely makes a lot more sense. However, I think that the fourth, like ball search card would probably be good. Maybe even like another energy, maybe just, some of their, like supporter. And I think a lot of people saw this list and they were like, how does this deck even function? But I actually sat down and I played some games with it, and it actually works. It works significantly better than I thought it was. I think the deck list is like definitely very, very creative. The Tatsugiri is super cool in the deck, but yeah, like when it comes to Rotom, I definitely would cut that for maybe just like another consistency card, or maybe like a fourth like Nest Ball that would probably be the consistency card. Maybe a third Iono as well. There's definitely like a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that you could probably do with this deck. But yeah, I think the deck is really, really cool. I think it has a lot of potential. I think without the Pidgeot, you're probably better in the mirror match as well, simply because you don't necessarily have to rely on, something like the Pidgeot, to kind of stabilize your board state. So I think you're just, probably better versus Pidgeot variant of Pult. And yeah, I'm definitely not surprised to see Pult do well, but to see it win, I think that definitely shocked a lot of people because it felt like Zard was overall the stronger Dusknoir variant, and things like Terapagos as well. So yeah, it definitely surprised a lot of people to see like this version of Dusknoir see the most
Yeah.
success.
And something else that really stands out to me from this list is that he doesn't play Manaphy. And that's something that I noticed in a lot of deck lists as I was looking through, even some Zard lists not playing Manaphy, which I think is something that can maybe be taken advantage of. Maybe for the CPOW demons out there, come back, throw out some Moonlight Shurikens and farm some Dreepies and Charmanders, because these stage 2 decks are getting a little out of line.
Yeah.
We also saw, this was before Stellar Crown, but Henry Chow won a regional, no Manaphy in his Gardevoir deck. So really just no respect for Radiant Greninja and Kyurem and such.
Yeah, I think that one of really the main Radiant Greninja deck is probably Palkia Dusknoir, and that deck they can just use something like the Dusknoir that pop the Manaphy first. So if that's the main Radiant Greninja deck, then Manaphy's pretty much useless in that matchup. However, with the card starting to be cut, decks like Reggie Drago potentially have I guess a little bit more ground to see success. However, Reggie Drago is kind of dealing with the Raging Bolts of the world, and also Lugia as well feels like a pretty tough matchup. So Raging Bolts is kind of pushing it out from kind of just what I've seen. So I think it's kind of created this perfect storm where decks can actually cut something like the Manaphy. However, if things like Chen Pao kind of start to see some success again, then you'll probably have to put it back in. But yeah, it's really interesting to see people just kind of cut the card entirely. I mean, I'm looking through a lot of these lists and there's just no Manaphy in pretty much any of them. I feel like the majority of these Zard lists, just don't actually have Manaphy. Some do, but a lot of them don't. And then a lot of the Dragapult lists just don't as well. So, kind of seeing that change, I think, a lot of Gardevoir lists as well are starting to cut it too. So yeah, people are not respecting Radiant Greninja anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stefan Ivanov was able to take advantage of that, playing the Palkia Dusknoir deck that Graft and Roll did well with. I really like this deck. I think after Baltimore, I initially thought this deck was a meme. I played it to a League Cup and I won the League Cup, and I still kind of thought the deck was a meme, but the more I think about it and the more games I play with this deck, the more real it is to me. And I think, especially when people aren't playing Manaphy, it makes it even more free, right? Like against Charizard, turn 2 Rare Candy Dusknoir Greninja attack is not gonna happen every time, right? But just a ninja attack is gonna happen every time, especially Greninja EX's Mirage Barrage, right? The best thing this deck can do is turn 2 before turn 2 Star Portal onto Froakie, and then Rare Candy into the Greninja and get off a Mirage Barrage. And you can actually Mirage Barrage back-to-back turns in a lot of matchups, because you can just know that your Greninja EX is not going to die, right? Against Charizard, you can just Mirage Barrage all their Charmanders or their Duskull even, and then your Greninja's going to live. So I think this is a deck a lot of people are overlooking. Greninja EX is the best card in the deck, and if you end up playing this deck, I highly recommend an Alt-Art Greninja EX, because that card looks incredible. Gotta flex on people. If you're gonna have 4 energies on your Greninja EX on turn 2, and it's not an Alt-Art, what are you doing? Come on.
Yeah, the deck's also actually pretty consistent. So I actually played against Stefan, and he took 4 prize cards by turn 2. He went Pop Dusknoir, KO, 2 of my small guys, and then went Radiant Greninja. And he was sitting at 2 prizes on the second turn of the game. And I was like, this deck is sick. Because it just plays itself. It just burns through itself, just super, super quickly. It only plays 5 or 6 straw supporters. So, Pokestop pretty much gets you, pretty much whatever you need. Yeah, yeah, and the deck is just, you know, like super aggressive. It can, you know, like definitely like cheese a lot of decks, and I think it's, yeah, significantly better than people give it credit for. Like I think just like when you look at the deck, you're just like, how is a Palkia deck like actually good? And then like you sit down, and you just, you know, kind of start to play games with it, and it actually starts to make a lot of sense. And you're just, you know, like such just like a fast and aggressive deck. You're, you know, pretty much able to punish any deck that stumbles, you know, even the slightest bit. You just completely run them over. So yeah, I think this deck is very good. Stefan lost a very close match in top 4 versus Lugia. And, you know, I definitely think it has a chance to beat pretty much anything in the format. I definitely really respect this deck. I do think the Raging Bolt matchup is pretty scary. I played some games of that matchup, and it felt like I had to pull off like a double. Like I felt like I had to pull off, you know, like 2 Dusknoirs in the second turn of the game, hit them with a hand disruption card, and it just felt like I was kind of playing from behind in that matchup, which I guess that's like the only matchup where I felt like I was, you know, struggling against. But the rest of the matchups felt like relatively good for the deck. It was honestly just like really impressive.
Yeah, those big basic kind of turbo decks, you have to evolve into Palkia V-Star, right? So they're always going to get that lead, and you don't really have a way to bring it back.
Yeah.
If you're not barraging for like cool multi-prize turns, it's just not really going to work out, I think. Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to talk about, Quad Thorns made top 8 in Dortmund, also made top 8 in Joinville. What do you think of Quad Thorns? Is this deck real? Did he fluke in on some good matchups, or does it actually shape up well into the new Stellar Crown metagame?
So I lost to this person actually. I was 5-1 heading into round 7. I was feeling pretty good, and then I hit a Quad Thorns, and I got swiftly dropped down to 5-2, and I think that's pretty much where I felt like my tournament kind of ended. I felt like if I was able to get up to 6-1 and then, you know, maybe get to 7-1, like I felt like I had a real shot. But you know, like once I got you know, paired up against the Thorns, I was just like, oh, this is not very good. Yeah, like I think the deck is, you know, pretty good. The majority of the Zard lists are cutting the Bibarel, which is, you know, very good. For Iron Thorns, I think the Bibarel makes the matchup at least 50-50, maybe even slightly favored for Zard. However, when the Zard player doesn't play the Bibarel, the matchup feels really bad. You have a pretty good matchup against a lot of the other like top decks. Like your Lugia matchup is, you know, completely free. And you know, like Lugia has been like definitely seeing a spike in play. Your Trapos matchup is, I think, close. I don't think it's great for Thorns. I think that matchup could definitely, you know, cause a lot of problems, you know, just because you can't really brick them that consistently. Your Raging Bolt matchup is close as well, kind of is just like, are you able to brick them? I think it's definitely a pretty decent deck right now. I don't think it's a tier 1 deck. I think it's probably like one of those decks where I'm not surprised to see it see success. However, I don't think I'd ever play it to a tournament just because I have no control really over my games. And I think that's, you know, kind of the biggest thing. I don't think it's a threat to win any tournaments, but I typically expect to see like one do well, like just because someone's just going to hit like all the right matchups. So, you know, like if you want to play a deck where you pretty much take all the control like out of your hands and you're pretty much just playing matchup roulette, then this is definitely the deck for you. I respect it. I think it's going to show up probably at Louisville. I just don't know how like good it's going to do because it's entirely based off matchups. But it had some decent matchups. So
I guess you're kind of, if you were playing Quad Thorns, you'd be trying to dodge Trapos, Bolt.
Pult's not a great matchup too. Like Pult doesn't feel very good. Yeah.
Yeah. You do have some energy disruption, but maybe not enough for a 320 HP guy that sets up for basically one-shotting Thorns.
Yeah,
and then all the random stuff is probably bad too. Oh, you don't beat Palkia Dusknoir because of Greninja EX. That's a bad one.
Yep.
And then, I don't know, any random decks like Golden Go. Actually, you maybe beat Golden Go, but like Dialga V-Star, Cloth. Yo, if you played Quad Thorns and you lost to Cloth, you hit Cloth.
Yeah.
That would be embarrassing.
Yeah, like I would say Quad Thorns kind of has the stall problem where like your most terrifying rounds is like rounds 1 through like 4, where you could just hit like a bunch of just like random decks that aren't necessarily like inherently very good, but just naturally beat your deck. So like I would say if you can get to the top tables with Thorns, you can definitely run the table. However, the problem is getting to that point. You can just hit, you know, like a terrible matchup and then you drop down to 0-1, and then you hit like a borderline theme deck that just happens to beat Yeah.
Yes. No, I'm
Yeah,
aware.
it gets so bad after some point. You just start to hit decks that aren't necessarily very good, but they beat Iron Thorns, and then there's just like nothing you can do, and then your tournament's pretty much over. So you have to accept that, that you don't have a whole lot of control over things. But some people are like definitely like willing to take that risk. Steven, who was able to get sixth place with the deck, was definitely willing to take that risk, and like they saw a lot of success. So congratulations to them.
Yeah. And they played a really interesting list too, actually, before we move on. There's a Cornerstone Ogerpon and a Mimikyu. And a Xerosix Machinations.
Yeah, so I played against them, and in game 1, they started the Mimikyu, and that was the only reason they lost the game, because I was able to counter catcher it up at some point to go Rare Candy Pidgeot, Rare Candy Charizard, and just like my board kind of exploded off that. So Mimikyu actually lost them the game. And I don't think Cornerstone also helps versus Zard as well. I think that also loses you the matchup versus Zard, because if it ever hits the board, they can actually put a bunch of energies onto the Zard. They can start to punch you with, something like, something like a Charmander. And I don't think those cards actually fix that matchup at all. I think they just cause problems for you just because they gives like Zard a shot to actually set up. So I don't exactly know why they were in the deck, but yeah, I guess they were, and he ended up seeing success. So what do I know?
Yeah, I don't think it's very good either. I think you lose like a lot of matchups by just starting not Iron Thorns. Like I can't imagine you're ever beating Raging Bolt if you start Iron Thorns, or like I don't know what else, like Lugia. Like all of a sudden you probably actually lose to Lugia if you don't start Iron Thorns.
Yep.
Right? Like they just probably get 5 energies on a Blood Moon or Saluna and like rip through your board.
Yeah.
Regidrago, like you just immediately lose.
Yeah. Lugia plays 4 bosses as well, so like they can like reasonably just like find a boss and then just go Summoning Star, and their board state is just like cooking. Because like if they ever get like a weirder with the legacy energy, like I don't think that Thorns can really beat that, because like they just start to smack for like 300 and your response is punch for 130. Like it just
140, and then you get immediately knocked out.
Yeah, and it just feels so bad. It's just so I would definitely probably take Thorns, maybe even take something similar to this list. Cut the Cornerstone. Cut the Mimikyu. I don't think you need this many Choruses. This the deck normally plays 2, right? Is this like a lot of Chorus? I see there's 3.
This is like a lot. Like the list I was testing for Worlds played 0.
Yeah, this is like heavy counts of a lot of things. The Xerosic as well. They actually hit me with the Xerosic in I think game 1, and I was like, whoa, but it didn't end up like really causing issues for me. It just didn't really seem like it mattered, because I feel like if you're bricking your opponent, you're bricking your opponent anyway. So I think the card is kind of counterintuitive, for like the strategy of your deck. So I don't know. It's a cool deck, but
all right,
we'll move on.
Yeah, we'll move on. Yeah. All right, so that's all I wanted to say about Dortmund. All the decks I thought were interesting. Do you think we missed anything from the Dortmund regional?
No, I think the biggest thing was Zard didn't necessarily see a whole lot of success. There were plenty that like made it into day 2, but the majority of them were in 64, 128, or 256. That was pretty much like the only really big surprise was that kind of development. The Zards were there. It's just that the metagame seemed a little bit like hostile towards it, and I think that typically happens at the very beginning of formats where there's a bunch of like brand new shiny cards, or like there's a deck that people think is going to be the strongest deck, and then everyone kind of texts for that deck, and the deck doesn't necessarily see a whole lot of success. So I would say this, Zard is a deck that didn't necessarily see a whole lot of success this previous weekend, but that's because I think people probably over-teched, for it, and that doesn't mean the deck is bad. Like the deck is still fundamentally incredibly powerful. It's just that it's kind of like that first event syndrome, and I definitely expected to see a lot more success, heading into future tournaments. So yeah, don't let this discourage you. It's still a very good deck.
It is, definitely. And one other thing, I'm just looking at the standings, and I just noticed that Kido Arai, another Japanese player who, how do I know him? He top cut like a couple ICs or something.
Yeah, he top 8'd LAIC and top 4'd NAIC, I believe, or
yeah, something like that. And he also played the exact same 60 of this Dragapult Dusknoir to 22nd place. So
yeah, he almost made top 8. He was at top tables for most of the time. Yeah, I was walking by and he was up there.
Yeah. Then this deck definitely bodies Charizard, right? This Dragapult deck. So, but anyways, over to the Joinville regional. Here, Zard saw a little more success. It was the #1 played deck in day 2, 16% of the day 2 metagame, and Lugia won the tournament, right? So this Lugia list, pretty standard, except for one card, except it has Wellspring, Mask, Ogerpony X. This is like a throwback to NAIC. I haven't seen anyone playing this card in Lugia since then.
People hyped it up for that event, and it didn't really do much. That's all I remember.
Yeah. What do you think of Wellspring, Ogerpony X?
So I'm very passionate about my hatred for this card, because almost every single matchup where you can take 2 prizes with the Wellspring, you would rather just attack with Iron Hands. One other problem with Wellspring is you take the energies off the board, so they can use something like a Boss's Orders to knock out Archeops. I would rather have 4 energy on an Iron Hands, force them to deal with it, because if they don't deal with it, then you can just use something like a Weird Ear, and just hit for 1,000 damage. So I think that Iron Hands is good to take 2 prizes. I'm not a huge fan of the Wellspring. Maybe you can catch some people off guard with maybe like Saw Block in some situations. That's actually kind of something that's like pretty cool. Yurko's list also did end up playing Thornton as well, which is a really interesting card, for this deck. I would say that Lugia's biggest problem is itself. It does, run into some consistency issues. So playing something like Thornton, in my opinion, is definitely a major risk, simply because drawing into this card on turn 1, turn 2, and even sometimes turn 3 is not good. So yeah, those were kind of like the takeaways. I'm not a big fan of the Wellspring. I can kind of see why some people like to play it, but I definitely personally would choose not to, for those reasons.
I mean, hey, if people are gonna cut Manaphy,
it gets better for that.
Hear me out. The question is, like, killing 2 Charmanders or like Charmander Pidgey or 2 Dreepies is definitely stronger than just killing 1 Dreepy for 2 prizes, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I guess the question is just, does it matter? Like,
I think you just win if you get turn 2 Iron Hands. That's like the thing, right? It's
yeah,
like, shouldn't you just win?
Just win.
Yeah.
Like, you're just ahead in the prize trade and you take 2 every turn and you just win.
Yeah, no, because I played this matchup at Dortmund and they got turn 2 hands and I lost the game. I was just like I'm a Zard player, I just went like Rare Candy Zard, and I was just like, wait, like they're already at 4 prizes and they just went, KO, and there was nothing I could have done, There were like some situations I could have played maybe like a little bit differently, but I felt like Wellspring wouldn't really have done anything in that spot. I felt like if I'm getting like the turn 2 playoff, I feel like if Lugia gets the double Archeops plus hands, it's winning probably 80% of its games at least. So I feel like just building your deck around doing that more consistently rather than adding in, I guess, like another, tech option, in like 4 games, I feel like is, definitely better. But that's just my opinion. I mean,
no, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Just turn 2 double chops and you should be good.
Yeah.
You can saw block though. I have lost a game to saw before.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Yeah. I was playing a game earlier today. I was like, wait a minute, I just lose to saw block. Now it ended up happening, but I was like, oh, this could be really, really bad if they just go Boss's Orders, because they had like 40 cards left and I had like 15, and I was like, wait, if they just gust me here, this is really bad. But I don't know if they saw the play or just I was just like, woof, thank goodness they didn't see that.
That's a great feeling when you realize like you should lose the game and then you just don't. Oh yeah, gosh. It's like Christmas morning.
Happens all the time, honestly. I feel like I'm like, oh dang, I could lose this game, and then they just like don't see the player, or like maybe they're missing like a Boss's Orders in a situation to like actually pull it off, and you just get completely bailed out. Yeah.
Okay, and the next thing I want to talk about, more exciting than this Lugia list. I should have talked about this first, but I felt like we had to give some respect to the winner there. Cloth making top 4. Now this Cloth list is crazy. 1 super effective Glasses with the Hisuian Electrode V. I guess that knocks out Charizard because you don't have the spicy curry, whatever. Was it just called spicy curry?
Curry something, yes, but that was the main card, and like that allowed like the Hisuian Electrode to actually hit for 400 damage on a Charizard, which now we do not have, unfortunately. So super effective is the only way to pull it off. But yeah, this list is crazy. Yeah, this is.
I know. There's Blood Moon, Ursaluna. A lot of 2 prizers in this deck. We have the Pecha run. I actually played against Cloth at a local box tournament, and I was playing Charizard. And this Pecha run, for those of you who don't know, it just makes poison do 5 more damage. So if you start Charmander and they have this Pecha run and a Radiant Sneasler and a Brute Bonnet, you just die to poison and lose the game turn 1. So
I wonder how many times I got that. I wonder if they were just like donking people.
I don't know. I checked in with them later in the day, and they weren't doing too hot. So I don't think they got to donk very many Charmanders. But this does bring up an interesting question for me. If you're playing Charizard at a regional, and you have 2 Charmanders in your opening hand, are you ever benching both Charmanders if you don't know what your opponent's playing and you're going second? Or no, just no. This is just nonsense, and Petron's bad.
I don't think there's ever a downside to having 2 Charmanders on the board. I think the only matchup where you'd ever get punished against like would maybe be like Block Lax or some type of control variant. I mean, if Cloth shows up at the next event and sees success or sees any type of respectable play, then maybe. I mean, something like Iron Valiant has existed for several months, and people, and that's not really a deck anymore. So I mean, I don't think I would bench double Charmander, but I think if Cloth does well again, then maybe you start to. But I honestly don't think it really matters. Like I don't think there's really going to be like ever a chance that you get punished for having double Charmander on the field, because Charizard in pretty much every single matchup wants to have double Charmander on the field. So
yeah. Okay. I hope. Actually, no, I don't hope this. But if I hear that you get donked by a Petron, I will tweet about it, and it will be pretty funny.
It'll be pretty funny, yeah. Hopefully I don't get punished for my thinking.
Hopefully not. I definitely am not benching double Pokemon either.
Yeah.
What else? There's also a quad thorns in the top 8. More of a standard build. No Ogerpon, no Mimikyu. Just a pretty standard build. There's 3 canceling clones in it. This guy was not down to lose to man. Yeah, not down to lose to Mimikyu. And I guess that paid off for him. There was a Snorlax in top 8 as well. Looks like a pretty old school build with the Chi-Yu. I haven't seen a Chi-Yu in Blocklax in a while, actually.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see.
I actually almost played it in my Zard list. I thought that it would, kind of fix the Solar control matchup. So I almost actually played that card. Funny enough, it was something that I was, kind of discussing like with my testing group. I was like, hey, like, what if we put this in, for this matchup? Does it fix anything? But yeah.
Did it not fix it, or did you just not think it was worth it?
You just didn't have enough time. I mean, like this, this was an idea, that came up like 6 or 7 p.m. And I was just like, I don't care. I was just like, I don't have the time, to put into it. I don't even know if it's good or not. I don't even know if I'm gonna hit any stall or control decks anyways. So like in theory, maybe it wins, but at that point, it's just like there's such a low chance you hit it regardless. So yeah.
Okay, and one more thing we can talk about. I just noticed as I'm looking at the standings here. Palkia Noctowl. A lot of people were talking about this deck. We were talking about this deck at one point when Stellar Crown was just kind of getting released. Didn't do too well. There's one here in the top 16 of Joinville. If I look back at Dortmund, I don't see one. There's one in top 32 over here. What do you think of this deck? Is it just kind of outclassed by Palkia Dusknoir? Or is there a spot for this deck in the metagame?
I think it is just pretty much outclassed by Palkia Dusknoir because you don't really have the ability to take, multi-prize card turns. I feel like Terapagos kind of does what Palkia needs to do, but just better and more consistently. I think that when you're playing Palkia without a Dusknoir package, your Zard matchup is just really, really bad. So I think that like the Dusknoir is really your only chance, versus something like Charizard. So I think that, one, it being just a little bit more inconsistent, and also I think just not having the power level that I initially kind of thought it did. After playing games with it, like right when Stellar Crown came out on TCG Live, I was kind of just like pretty disappointed in it. I was just like, this deck is not as good as I kind of initially thought. I think it's solid. I think it's fundamentally a decent deck. I just think it's just a tier 2 deck. I think it's a tier 2 or tier like 2.5 deck. It's not broken in any way. Like I think like something like the Dusknoir variants, they have insane qualities about them. Like they have the ability to like win the game on the second turn of the game, where this deck doesn't really have that. I think it's just a very fair and balanced deck, and like right now we're in a format where the strongest decks don't really feel fair and balanced, and I think that's kind of the issue with this deck. So maybe in the future it will see success, but right now I just don't think it has enough really going for it, and I think it will just kind of sit around a tier 2 or tier 2.5 deck. I definitely think people will play it. I think the deck will potentially see some success. Maybe like some will make it into day 2 moving forward, but I don't think it really has the legs to actually, I guess, like win a tournament, but it's still decent.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. This deck feels very fair. You don't attack on turn one. You do have like uncapped damage basically. Um, but like at that point, just play Raging Bolt, right?
Yeah.
This deck doesn't do anything that Raging Bolt doesn't, other than use Radiant Greninja, I suppose.
That's the only
And it,
quality it has is like Radiant Greninja.
yeah, and it just also doesn't attack on turn one. So yeah, I agree. This deck's just kind of outclassed by Raging Bolt and Palkia Dusknoir in different ways. So, yeah. All right. So moving on, we put out a post on Twitter asking our viewers for some questions, and we got a decent amount of responses. I think I got about 10 questions here that we're going to be going through. Now, the first question we have is from Katie, and she asks, will Rahul top 8 with the same list, or will he be stopped?
I'm going to say yes. I think that I would not be surprised. I'm going to bet on this man making the top 8 again. He is on he got 9th at Worlds, and then top 8, and then it was 9th at Worlds, top 8, then 2nd with the same 60. That's something we haven't seen in quite some time. Definitely is a hot streak for sure. I think that Lugia, unfortunately, is a deck that can be kind of a glass cannon at times. Sometimes it feels just absolutely just like unbeatable, but sometimes it feels absolutely terrible. I actually played around like with this 60, and I actually really like things like the Earthen Vessel, not necessarily to get lightning energy, but just to have another way to dump the Archeopsis. I was just like, dang, I'm like never using this Raikou, but this Earthen Vessel though, is helping me out. So I think his list is pretty cool. I personally don't think I would play Raikou. I watched some of the games that he played, and I didn't see Raikou being used a whole lot. But yeah, he's like definitely been on a hot streak. I would not be surprised like if he continued it. I bet he's gonna roll up to Louisville with the exact same 60. I'd be shocked if he didn't. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Like you're seeing so much success with a deck, and I think that's actually something that's kind of important to go over. I think that comfortability means a lot more in the Pokemon TCG than people give it credit for. And it seems like he's kind of found a deck that he's super comfortable with. Is able to see consistent success. I mean, I would say like the perfect example of this would probably be someone like Andrew Hedrick, who won, back-to-back regionals with a deck that he was, pretty comfortable with. And just, I feel like when you look at a lot of the top players, it seems like they play the same deck over and over and over again. And I think that's something that people kind of forget. I think people are like, oh, I have to play the strongest deck like for this event. And that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes playing the deck that you say, okay, this might not be the strongest, but it might be the second or, third best deck in the format. And maybe I know that deck just a little bit more, so I'm going to play that deck instead. And I think people, kind of need to think about that.
Yeah, I agree. Especially sometimes it's really hard to actually nail a meta game. Like it almost feels like a bit of a crapshoot sometimes. Like, okay, I look at all this data, I look at all these tournaments, and I'm like, hey, I think these are going to be the most played decks. And then everyone plays Quad Cornerstone Noivern, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. I don't have a canceling clone. That's really awkward.
Yep, tournament chalk.
So, right? But if I just randomly played like my, I don't know, whatever favorite deck, and then you get to beat those decks. So definitely some value to just playing.
Just play what you're good at. People don't I think like that enough for the time, because they see the deck that like most recently like won a tournament, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna play that deck, and then they show up to the event and they've played maybe 10 games with the deck, and then they just don't see a whole lot of success because they don't know exactly like what they're doing. Like I knew of some players in the past that would literally play the deck that like won the previous tournament for like every single event. They would just like switch, and they wouldn't necessarily know how to play the deck a whole lot. And like when they were playing decks that they were, more comfortable with, they saw much more success. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I do. For the record, I think Rule will be stopped specifically because I'm playing 4 Temple of Sinnohs in my deck. I'm sick of this. We got to put an end to this. Everyone
lock
unite.
In Iron Thorns, everyone.
4 Sinnohs in your Iron Thorns deck. Let's do this, guys.
Everyone lock in Thorns.
All right. Cynthia asked, does Pult winning Dortmund make it a bigger threat than other decks yet to reach the highs pre-Shrouded Fable like Guardy?
That's a good question. Does Pult winning make it more of a threat? I would say I don't think the Pult deck is tier 1. It felt like tier 1.5, like when I was like playing games with it. I actually don't think it beats Lugia very consistently. I think that Rahul just drew very poorly in that set.
Mhm.
I think that, Pult definitely will see an uptick in play because people, kind of have like the data to say, okay, like this deck is real. However, I don't necessarily know how, strong that, variant of the deck is. So I would definitely respect it, but I don't think its results will be necessarily astronomically stronger. Um, so yeah, that's, kind of my answer. And then the other part was, is a bigger threat than other decks that to reach the highs pre-shrouded fable like Guardy. Um,
I think she just meant like, is the deck
just
going
in
to
a vacuum.
become as big of a threat as Guardy
Oh,
was?
gotcha. No,
Um,
like I
I
don't
don't
think
think so.
so. It's not fundamentally a broken deck. It's okay.
No. I don't think like it's going to be the most played deck or anything. I do think that it could end up on the graphic, right? It could be one of the top 5 most played decks. I think a lot of people picked up their Dragapult Pidgeot deck with the new, what's the crystal called? Sparkling
Yeah.
Crystal. And it just wasn't that good. And then I think everyone kind of put it down. So I think all those people who tried it out when the set dropped are going to revisit it and try it again. So I would respect this deck going into Louisville, but I don't think it'll be like in the top 3.
Yeah, personally for my testing, it just kind of felt like Warzard. That was, kind of my
Mm.
testing experience. It just felt like the other Dusknoir variants were a little bit more oppressive. And yeah, I think the deck is good. I don't think it's overwhelming in any way. I definitely respect the deck. I think it will see success. But I don't think it's gonna show up and like win another tournament. But like I could be proven wrong. That list definitely surprised us. So could be surprised again.
Yes, it did. We could. We could. All right. Evelyn asked, what deck is the most resilient to the heavy Dusknoir game plans that have been becoming more popular? This is a good question, actually. Um,
That's a good one. I'm gonna say Lugia is probably the most resistant to Dusknoir. I think that the deck can still, like definitely, lose to something like Dusknoir, but I think the high HP decks, Lugia, for example, Raging Bolt, I think those are kind of the decks that are the most able to stand up, to the Dusknoir variants.
mhm.
I think that would probably be my answer.
I feel like this question is hard to answer because the different Dusknoir decks play very differently,
Yeah.
right? Like, for example, Charizard or like Dragapult or Gardevoir all stand up really poorly to like Dusknoir, Radiant Greninja, right? Whereas I think Raging Bolt stands up really poorly to Terapagos Dusknoir.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think thinking of Dusknoir like as a card, I agree with you. Lugia doesn't give a whole lot of value to Dusknoir. Um, as long as you don't bench Cincino, it's really hard for Dusknoir to actually find value. Like 2 Dusknoirs doesn't kill a Lugia V-Star, 1 Dusknoir doesn't kill Archeops, right? So your Pokemon are all kind of awkwardly bulky. Um, as I'm thinking about this, I think Ancient Box actually is like the most resistant, just because Roaring Moon has 140. So Dusknoir is just horrible into. I guess you can pop Radiant Greninja though. Um,
Yeah, that's like your best bet is to pop the Greninja. I think like any deck that like knows not to bench the Radiant Greninja. For example, like Raging Bolt doesn't necessarily have to bench Radiant Greninja. Like versus the Dusknoir variants. Like yes, there'll be a lot of situations where they have to, but like if they get off like the turn 1 Squawk, they get down Pheasantipity, they don't necessarily have to bench something like the Radiant Greninja. As someone who has played a tournament with the Dusknoir engine, I felt like when they put down, something like the Radiant Greninja, I just felt so much better about my chances.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, that's a good tip. And for people who maybe don't know what we're talking about there, if you bench Radiant Greninja as Raging Bolt, Charizard and Terapagos can both do this to you. They can, if you're on 2 prizes and they're on 4, they can play Briar, and then they can Dusknoir your Radiant Greninja and just knock out a 2 prizer for a 4 prize turn.
Yep.
So if you're playing Raging Bolt, if you have to bench Radiant Greninja, put a Bravery Charm on it. That's a big tip.
Yeah, but Bravery Charm on it. That's something that a lot of players I think are kind of like overlooking because they're so used to putting it on something like the Teal Mask or something like the Raging Bolt. You
Yeah.
can definitely catch like some Dusknoir decks, kind of like by surprise, like if you put it on there. Because a lot of the Dusknoir decks also aren't playing vacuum as well. So like that charm is like
Mm.
oftentimes going to stick. For example, the majority of Zard lists don't actually play vacuum anymore. So
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
it's a pretty good card. Yeah, I kind of wanted it actually. I ended up like not playing it, but I kept running into situations where Charm was pretty annoying. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Hero's Cape also is like insane if it goes unchecked.
Yes. If they play Heroescape in the mirror match and you don't have vacuum, they just slap that thing onto Pidgeot and it becomes very difficult to win.
You gotta like Dusknoir it and then kill it or something. I don't know.
It feels so much harder than just like using something like a Dusclops. Like that's like so much easier in the mirror match just because you already have to burn your rare candies. You're already kind of worried about the Devo play as well. So like you don't really want to have to burn your rare candies on something like Dusknoir. So yeah.
All right, Joshua wants to know if either of us feel like Drago or Bolt have a decent shot into this meta, or is it time to start building Terapagos exclusively? It's time to build Terapagos exclusively. Sorry, Joshua, that's the only deck you can play. It's BDAF. And next question. No, I was kidding. What do you think, Gabe? What do you think? What do you think of Drago and Bolt Pawn?
I think that Bolt has a much better chance at seeing success in this format. I think that Drago is still fundamentally a very powerful deck. I think that's, not really debatable. However, its matchups just don't feel great in this format. I think the Lugia matchup is just very, very tough. I think the Bolt matchup as well, especially if they are playing Charms, is just really, really bad too. Like that matchup just doesn't feel, very good. I think your Terapagos matchup is largely dependent on who's able to go first. From my experience, like as a Terapagos player, like when I go first, I feel pretty good against the Drago matchup. I think that, Drago last format, Raging Bolt was a much less, I would say, like viable deck. So I think that Drago had a chance, but now that, Lugia has just seen so much success. I mean, we look back at like Baltimore, there were 3 in top 8, like one got second, and then Steven Varesco and Rahul, both saw success as well. So I think that Drago's time, to kind of sit, in the back seat is probably right now. I think that Bolt definitely has a pretty okay matchup versus Zard. I've played the matchup quite a bit. Bolt definitely can do well versus Zard, having access to something like the Briar. Even though you don't use it in most games, it just kind of forces the Charizard player to play, very differently. You also are just a pretty consistent deck, and like being able to take, knockouts on that first turn is very good. Like your matchups against things like Palkia as well, like as a Bolt player, are solid as well. Whereas Drago takes a much more scary matchup against those. So I think that Bolt is probably a little bit stronger overall. But I think Terapagos out of all 3 of those is definitely the strongest deck out of the 3 in my opinion.
I'm actually going to disagree with you a little here. I think Drago is actually really good. People cutting Manaphy, kind of huge. Free Kirums. There's a lot of matchups where you can actually just win with 2 Kirum attacks, right? A lot of turbo decks. Terapagos, right? If Terapagos doesn't play Bouffalant or Manaphy, you can just Kirum twice. And they don't have... It's hard to do. It is. But, like, for example, if like you go second, and you put down some Dragos and they knock one out, now you have Fez and like all your draw power for the whole game to just cure them twice, and they have no outs. It's kind of a good spot to be in, right? So I also think the Bolt and Lugia matchups aren't as bad as you might actually think. You can use Radzard against Bolt, force him to have a lot of Gus. Definitely not a good matchup, but definitely winnable. And same with the Lugia, especially if you're playing Sinnoh, and especially when you get to go first. That I find that matchup to be relatively okay as well. Definitely not favorable matchups, but I do also think Drago has a phenomenal matchup into Charizard and Dragapult. So don't sleep on Drago. Bolt is definitely good, and Terapagos is definitely best. Up next, Esther wants a junior senior Metaforcast. This whole episode we have been talking about the meta, the Masters meta. So what is... I'm going to change the question a little bit. What do you think is the biggest difference in terms of specific decks between the junior, senior, and master meta?
Yeah, so first off, I'll start off with the junior division. From what I've noticed, for the junior division, a lot of the times the most successful decks are stall and control variants. That's like one thing I've noticed. I felt like those decks see a lot more play, and also success rates. in that division, because I think a lot of kids just haven't necessarily put the time into really, I guess, like understanding how to play versus those matchups. So I definitely think that those decks, make a very strong, choice for that division. And if you don't like plan to play the deck, practice against them. It's really, really important because like a lot of the top, juniors, do choose to play those decks. I would say, when it comes to the senior division is a lot more similar to the masters division, kind of from what like I've seen. I can't really make any predictions on what I expect, like will be like different. I would say that from what I've noticed, they're very willing to net deck, and a lot of them stick on the same deck. That's like kind of like one thing like that I've noticed is a lot of the top seniors and juniors really value comfort picks, and they like really like to stick with one singular deck. So I think that maybe paying attention to what like the previous tournament, what what like some of like the top seniors or juniors like ended up playing, then maybe you can kind of apply. However, for this event, that's not necessarily the case because Stellar Crown is a brand new set that is definitely changing things up a little bit. So I think that this event is pretty difficult like when it comes to preparing. I would definitely try and keep up like with the like Masters metagame, because I bet it's going to be pretty similar. And then like once we kind of have the data from this, then kind of using the I guess kind of predicting that a lot of players will play the same things like moving forward, then you can kind of apply that. But like for this event, you can't really do that. So that would be kind of my answer. I know that's you coach plenty of juniors and seniors, so I would love to kind of know what your thoughts are and kind of some of the differences.
Yeah. So I'll talk about juniors first. I noticed that I noticed two things. One, they love their comfort picks a lot. Specifically, Lugia and Charizard seem to be big comfort picks for juniors. So I would expect to see those in large numbers. And then kind of touching on what you said about control always succeeding in juniors, I noticed that just kind of like off meta decks do really well in juniors, specifically control. And kind of like what you were saying, my theory for this is that a lot of juniors and a lot of the top juniors are getting coaching, right? And so in coaching sessions, not in honestly, in zero of my coaching sessions have my juniors tested against Cloth, for example, right? Or
Goldango.
Or Goldango, right? So I think sometimes juniors go into these tournaments and they play against these weird decks that maybe are worse than the decks they're playing, but because they don't really know how to play against them, they don't have that practice, they tend to overperform. So that's something that I would definitely call out, is that I see off meta decks do well in juniors. And then for senior Metaforcast, you kind of mentioned it. Senior meta tends to lag one behind masters a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of seniors net decking like towards Trapos list or the Dragapult list. I also noticed that seniors tend to dislike decks like Raging Bolt and like those kind of turbo decks.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. I felt like, and for me, when I was a senior, when I was like 14, 15, 16, I always wanted to play like the cool deck, right? Like the combo deck or I don't know, like the comeback deck or something, right? I never wanted to play the turbo deck of the format. And I think seniors today keep that trend, right? So decks like Bolt I expect to be low. Decks like Dragapult I would expect to be a bit higher. Control decks always seem to do well in seniors as well. And what else? Yeah, I would say just watch out for all the top decks from the previous event. Trapos and Dragapult are the two I would call out specifically for seniors.
Sure. Yeah, I would also probably note that I think for juniors as well, there's a lot of just like turbo decks. I think that like a lot of like the younger kids like to play like the really simple decks, whereas like in seniors, I feel like a lot of them kind of almost, I would say, like cook too much. I've seen some just like pretty crazy lists and stuff like that some of them have played. But I think that a lot of the junior players like to play like a little bit more safe. But yeah, no, I think a perfect example was I believe at Los Angeles regionals in the junior division, I believe Goldango won, and like that was a format where like no one was really talking about that deck. So yeah, you kind of explained it perfectly that like expect the unexpected. I think that's one big thing, specifically for the junior division. Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship between like turbo decks and teenagers reminds me of my like having an older brother, right? Like when you turn 15, your younger brother, aka Raging Bolt, is no longer cool, and you have to differentiate yourself, right?
Yep.
So I think it kind of follows that mindset. I think that's maybe where it comes from.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question from Mohammed, shout out Mohammed, cool guy. Is Terapagos too hyped to bring into the event?
No, I don't think it
And
is.
yeah, I know my answer for this one. No, I don't think it is. I think a lot of people are underrating this deck. No matter how many Twitter posts I make, no matter how many YouTube videos I put out, no matter how many master classes I run, which by the way, I'm running a master class on Tuesday with Kieran Farah on Terapagos. So for anyone interested in playing Terapagos to Louisville, check it out. But I think people are still underrating this deck, and Towards doing a masterclass on it too. And I still think people are underrating it. So that's my answer.
Yeah, no, I think it's very good. I think it's, hyper consistent. It feels like you have a lot of control over games. And I think the reason as to why we saw like Terapagos's, day two conversion rate at Dortmund be so high is because a lot of the top, strongest players ended up playing the deck. It's a deck that really rewards, skill, like understanding exactly, how to like map out those, turns. And I think that, it's consistent as pretty much everything you want in a top tier deck. Like it has the ability to win super fast. It has, some like the comeback potential. It's, consistent. And it just feels like it kind of comes down to you. And I think that's something that's just like really powerful. I think that it's, not a deck like Iron Thorns per se, where it's just like, I hope my opponent doesn't have it. Something like that, where it feels like a lot of the control is taken out, or some like stall where it's like, I hope my opponent, doesn't play like a bunch of switch cards or, things like that. So I think that you feel like you just have so much like control in games. And I think that's, one of like the most, valuable things. And like you can win the game on turn 3, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think that still people aren't going to play it to the level that I feel like they should. Like, I still think that, probably Zard will be the most played deck. I would be surprised if it wasn't. I still think, decks like Zard, Raging Bolt will see a lot of play. Now, I think that Terapagos is going to go up, probably hit at least 8 to 10%, but I think it's so strong, it should be being played at, a higher level. And I think that's really the only reason. I'm going to say maybe the reason like at Dortmund was because people just didn't have the cards yet. Maybe like at Louisville, we see the, same, problem kind of start to arise, but I feel like people should have enough time, to actually get the cards because the set's been out for, several weeks now. So yeah, there's no excuse not to try the deck out because it is, really good.
I think the reason this deck is so underrated is because people play it once or twice and they don't see the full potential. They don't see like the specific plays, the way to manipulate Dusknoir and Briar, and sometimes not use them at all, right? And I think prize mapping is like a huge part of this deck, and if you can prize map well with the deck, you're going to see a lot of success.
Yeah.
Up next, Justin asked, since you played Charizard, I assume he's talking about you, Gabe, Zard didn't make top 8 at Dortmund or Joinville. Is this due to new toy syndrome, ebb and flow of the meta, or is it starting to decline versus the field?
Yeah, I think it's definitely new toy syndrome. I think I kind of spoke about that, towards the beginning of the podcast. Charizard's still an insanely powerful deck, definitely, in my opinion, no doubt is a, tier 1 deck, definitely top 3 deck in the format. I think that, new toy syndrome is, definitely kind of the, reason why the deck didn't necessarily see a whole, a lot of success. I think that, you have the ability to also kind of, tech for the metagame. If decks, like Iron Thorns are concerning you, then you can play something like a Babero line. Like if you're like worried about the Lugia matchup, you can play something like a Hero's Cape in the deck. It has the flexibility to kind of, tech versus the specific matchups that, you kind of want to beat. And now like we're kind of getting like a better idea of exactly like where the metagame is going to be. So I would not, hesitate to play Zard. I think Zard heading into Louisville is stronger than it was, heading into Dortmund. I think heading into Dortmund, the majority of players were like, okay, this is by far the strongest deck. Now that's maybe not necessarily the case, as we saw the deck not see a whole lot of success. So I think that, potentially Zard maybe has fallen, kind of off the pedestal. And I think that's a good thing for it. I think that's, really, really good. I think that, something like Dragapult is kind of the perfect example. People weren't really expecting Pult to, see the most success at this tournament. When it comes to, something like Lugia V-Star as well. People weren't necessarily talking about that deck a whole lot heading into the tournament, and then it got second place, right? So I think the less people, talk about the deck, the more, people start to, hype up things, like the Trapagoses of the world, and I think the stronger Zard is going to get. I still respect it, and I think it's really good.
Oh yeah, I absolutely am respecting this deck heading into Louisville. And it kind of segues into our next question, actually, from Wyatt. They asked, which decks do you believe need to be respected going into Louisville? So let's put it this way. What do you think the top 3 most played decks going into Louisville are going to be?
Yeah, so I still think Zard will be the number 1 deck. I think Zard does everything well. Everything about the deck is good. It has, pretty much everything it needs to be successful. It doesn't really have any, like weak points. So I think that the deck is just, overall very solid. I think the second most played deck will probably still be Raging Bolt. I think that it's a deck that a lot of people feel, just super comfortable with. It's a relatively easy deck to learn, like the basics of. And I think that a lot of people, kind of gravitate towards that. Like we saw it be, very highly played at Baltimore, and then also like at Dortmund as well. It was played in, very big numbers. And I think that third spot is going to be a battle between probably Terapagos and Lugia. I think that will, probably, I don't think a whole lot of people are going to, catch on to the Dragapult deck. I definitely think Dragapult will be on the graphic, but I don't expect it to hit, 8 to 10%. I could definitely see it, kind of sitting around that 6 to 7%. But I think that, Lugia and probably Terapagos will be the ones that will be fighting for that third spot.
I was going to make the exact same list, and I was going to firmly put Lugia at number 3.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, especially like anyone who has been a Lugia enjoyer in the past is probably watching Rule's success with Lugia and going, all right, it's time. Let's all play Lugia. Yeah. So I think
everyone has the cards for it. Like, it's been out for so long.
Yes,
that actually means something.
Yes.
That means way more than people give credit for.
I agree. I agree.
I remember when Mew was a deck that there were like multiple tournaments like a year ago where like Mew wasn't necessarily a very good play, but the deck had been out for like 2 years and everyone, had cards for it, and the deck was still the second or third most played deck in the room. It's just because everyone, just like had the cards for it. It was a deck that had been around for so long. Like the Battle League deck, had been out as well for, several months, and the deck just consistently was a, top, 3 to 4 play deck, despite its, viability in the format. And I think people don't really take that as seriously as they should. And I think that a lot of the people, going to Louisville, they've been, locked on their deck for the past, 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't think that sometimes, Dortmund will definitely change a lot for, I think, the stronger players, but for like a lot of the people that maybe go to, 1 or 2 regionals, I don't think that, like this event is going to drastically change a whole lot, for their choice.
I also think any kind of like densely populated area that's going to have a lot of local players attending, this effect goes up, right? I think if you're willing to fly to a regional, you're willing to buy different decks and practice a lot and change decks and such. But if you live a 2-hour drive away, it's pretty easy to just sign up for the regional and show up with your favorite deck. So that's definitely something I would think about with that. Muta asks, will any Hydrapple make day 2? I hope so.
Yes, I hope so as well, because I think the deck is, really cool. However, the only issue with this deck, well, I guess there's a couple issues. The biggest problem is that it can one-shot things, but it can one-shot things as a stage 2, which is unfortunately just worse Raging Bolt, worse, Roaring Moon. Those are like a lot of the problems, because the majority of decks in the format can, deal with the Hydrapple, unfortunately. So I think the deck is really cool. However, it, kind of like the problem with Palkia Terapagos, there's nothing broken about it. There's like nothing like super special about it. Pretty much every like top tier deck in the format does something kind of crazy, and this deck doesn't have that. I think that Bolt is probably just a better deck that can just do a ton of damage, but it's a cool deck. I would not be surprised if one made day 2. I would say that there'll be at least one that gets to their winning in. I'll make that kind of prediction. I mean, you only got to go 6-2. I
Bro,
mean,
stop.
you only got to go
6-2?
6-2. Yeah, because I think it's going to be under 2048 Masters. I could be wrong on that, but I would not be surprised if one got semi-close. But I mean, we've seen, crazier decks that I've thought are way worse than, Hydrapple make day 2. So I'm a believer. Maybe one gets it.
This card is terrible, man. 30 damage for each grass energy? How many grass energy do you need to knock out, like,
we don't talk
I don't
about
know, a bolt, bro? You need 7 grass energy to knock out a bolt? Dude, you're going to be behind like 4 prizes by the time you attack.
Hey, but your Pokemon will look really cool doing a lot of damage.
They will look really cool. I'm looking at this alt art.
Yeah.
Hydrapple EX. Holy cow.
I hope someone shows up with a fully blinged out deck and just, sends it. I mean, to be fair, Ross has been playing that Shaman, Dusknoir variant the past couple tournaments. I don't know why, but yeah, I mean, people have played crazy.
He's completing side quests, man. Like, he's just having fun. All right, and our final question from Kino asks, is Gardy Cope? Is the 1/1 TM Evo Devo the optimal pick? Okay, essentially just asking if the 2 Flutter Mane version, like the Henry Chow NAIC. Oh, that's funny. They're both Henry Chow. That's essentially asking if the Henry Chow NAIC Gardy with Flutter Mane Double Monkey or like the Rare Candy version is better.
So I think the Rare Candy version is much better in a format where Regidrago is, seeing a lot of play. That is obviously not the case right now. I think you go back to just a very, standard, kind of slow Gardevoir list. I think double Flutter Mane is fine, but you really want something like the Klefki as well. Klefki is very important for the Terapagos matchup. Being able to shut off the Fan Rotom is huge. So I would probably say just going back to a very standard variant. I don't think the turbo variant in this format is necessarily very good. I think it's okay, but once again, that version did significantly better versus the Regidragos, while sacrificing some other matchups instead. But as I said, Drago's not a threat at the moment. When it comes to the playability, and I guess the play rate. I think the play rate is definitely going to be the biggest thing because Drago's so strong, but its play rate's going to go down. The 1/1 TM Evo, I would probably play 2 of the Evo, 1 of the Devo. I think that's probably fine right now. I don't think you want to play 1, but that's also because you're going back to just the standard 4 Arven, 4 Iono. I think it's decent. I think the deck is still relatively solid. I don't think it's the strongest deck in the format, but your matchups versus everything are kind of okay. You're not really exceptional versus anything. I think your matchup versus Lugia, if you play Enhanced Hammer, is 60-40, but all the other matchups are very, very close, and that's the biggest, kind of problem with the deck is, do you want to play a deck that you have to go into the event? This is going to sound, kind of bad, but do you want to go into an event, kind of having to try hard in every single matchup because every matchup is, so close. And I think that's the only issue with it. But it's still good. And then also you have to run into the fact of the tie factors too. But I still think it is good. I still think the deck is good. It's better than people are giving it credit for. People are, kind of starting to write it off, but I think it's still fundamentally a pretty solid deck. And I expect it to do well.
I would highly recommend playing the Rare Candy build. If you play no Rare Candies in your deck, you will get demolished by Terapagos and a lot of Dusknoir decks that just pop a Dusknoir on turn 2 and remove both your Curlios from play after you Evo. And the game is just over on the spot.
Just Klefki, bro. They don't got that.
Bro, just Klefki? What if you go second? You're cooked.
Yeah, but I think you're cooked anyways.
Yeah.
I think you lose regardless.
Even if you play all the Rare Candies and stuff?
Yeah, but your deck just sucks. I don't know.
Yeah, that's gonna... the Rare Candy. His list was really good. I played it at a couple locals. I have to say, respect to Henry Chow. That was a good Gardevoir deck. As a Gardevoir enthusiast, it was a good deck.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I don't know. I feel I guess my logic is if I'm going first, because I think I'm blind going first with Gardevoir. If I'm able to get a Klefki in the active, I'm pretty confident I can get a Gardevoir up at some point versus one of these Dusknoir decks. But yeah, I guess I also really like having, I guess, more space. I think right now you have a decent amount of space in the deck. I think you can cut something like the Manaphy as well. That kind of opens up more. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably tier 1.5. I don't think it's tier 1. I think it's just an average deck at the moment. It's just you have to try so hard versus every matchup, and every matchup is doesn't feel great, and that's the issue with it. But I still think it's going to do well. Someone's going to show up and someone's going to top 8 the event with it. I'd be surprised if there wasn't one that went really far, because it's still such a powerful deck. I mean, like Unfair Stamp is just, broken. Secret Box as well is, broken. Both the aspects of choice, are like very, very good in the deck. So yeah, Gardevoir is Gardevoir. It's like definitely going to survive.
All right. Well, that's all the questions we had, and all the regionals and metagame we had to talk about. I had a lot of fun talking about Pokemon with you, Gabe. I hope our viewers learned something and enjoyed the podcast. Let us know if you have some more questions. Toss them in the comments section down below. Leave a like and subscribe to Smart TCG.
Gabe, and Rowan as well.
Yeah,
link will be in the description. And the Metafy course as well. Check that out. Yeah, all that stuff will be in the description. Make sure to check it out.
Thanks, Gabe. You're a real one. All right. Peace, guys.
All right, peace out.